بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولي الصالحين وأشهد أن محمدا خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. اللهم آمين. All praise is due to Allah, the Creator, Cherisher, and Sustainer of the universe. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his last and final messenger. May the peace, blessings, and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon him, his companions, and those who follow his path until the day of judgment. Allahumma ameen. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue our series, Striving for Excellence. Tonight, inshallah, we will be looking at a verse from Sura Ar-Rahman. And Sura Ar-Rahman is a very beautiful surah. All the verses and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are beautiful, but it's beautiful in a unique way because there's repetition, and it's not really repetition. And if you really read Surah Ar-Rahman with an open mind, you find that it really speaks directly to your hearts. And that's a topic for another time. But one verse that we will touch upon tonight, inshallah, is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the beginning, He talks about an overarching concept. And we may have addressed this in a khutbah several months ago, but we'll go in depth tonight, inshallah, in the few minutes that we have together. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. Weigh with justice and do not give short measure. And on the surface, this appears to be talking about financial dealings. You know, be very straightforward. Don't cut anyone short. If you're paying a debt, if you're buying, be equitable. Financial transactions should be just. You pay what you're getting, you pay for what you're getting, etc. But there's a bigger overarching principle here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks in these verses about the principle of justice, and that in the creation itself, the creation was just. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a balance in everything that was created. So everything around us was created in a balanced way. And Allah wants us as human beings to live within this balanced order. And when we don't establish that same justice in all aspects of our lives, that's when problems arise. So this concept of justice isn't just about when we go to court, we need to get our rights. Or when I have a dispute with someone, then whoever has the right gets their right. No, it's about living a life of justice. Having a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is based on justice. Looking forward to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having not committed an iota of injustice in this life. So it's a larger overarching principle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to comprehend so that we are able to establish it in our lives. And Allah tells us that the purpose of the whole revelation is for justice to be established. So He says in Surah Al-Hadid, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. The whole reason that Allah sent prophet after prophet and messenger after messenger and revelation after revelation and sent down the balance is for justice to be established. That's the overarching reason. Why? Because mankind by nature tends to want more than their fair share of the pie. We're greedy. We want more than what Allah has allotted for us. So even though I may have more than my neighbor, I still want more than what my other neighbor has, because I see that someone else has more. So man by nature is always aspiring for more. So there have to be boundaries. There have to be boundaries. And there are many injunctions in the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that direct us towards establishing justice. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر. Allah commands justice, grace, as well as courtesy to close relatives. وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم. And say, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and by extension all the believers, I believe in every scripture that Allah has revealed, and I am commanded to judge fairly among you. يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض فاحكم بين الناس بالحق ولا تتبع الهوى فيضلك عن سبيل الله. O Dawood, we have surely made you an authority in the land, so judge between people with truth and justice, and don't follow your desires, lest they will lead you astray from Allah's way. And we'll talk about these desires later, inshallah. We have the example of Rabi'i ibn Amir. Rabi'i ibn Amir was one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, when in one of the expeditions, when he was standing before Rustum, the commander of the Persians, and Rustum was going crazy. What are these guys in their ragged clothes smelling like sheep? What do they want from us? And what does Rabi'i say? He says, نحن قوم ابتعثنا الله لنخرج العباد من عبادة العباد إلى عبادة رب العباد ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل الإسلام ومن ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة. We are a people whom Allah brought forth to guide people, to bring them from what? لنخرج العباد من عبادة العباد, from subservience to people to subservience to the creator of people. But they are the ones who do injustice to themselves. وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. The word of your Lord has been perfected by two things, truth and justice. Those are the two prongs that protect and guide the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. It's not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to commit injustice against any of his servants. And the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith narrated by Abu Dawud says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَعْطَى كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقًّا. Allah has appointed for everyone who has a right what is due to him. Everyone is going to get what is due to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An important point to keep in mind as we go through the discussion of justice, and I've mentioned this before, but as a refresher, justice is not equality. Justice is not equality, and I want the youth in particular to pay attention to this concept. Justice is not equality. We don't have equality in Islam. There are certain things in which there is equality. Rights and responsibilities before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are equal. He expects us to pray and to fast and to do these kinds of things. But Allah established justice and not equality. And He says this very clearly in the Qur'an. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم. Those who stay at home, who stay back, who don't step forth, who are not involved in their community, who are not standing up, who are not sacrificing without a legitimate excuse, they're not equal to those who strive in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their wealth and their lives. They're not sacrificing. They're not equal. They're not the same, because it would not be just for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to equate them. Allah has elevated in rank those who strive with their wealth and their lives above those who stay behind with valid excuses. And Allah has promised each a fine reward. They have their rewards, but they're not going to be equal before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل أولئك أعظم درجة من الذين أنفقوا من بعد وقاتلوا. So there were those who accepted Islam before the conquest of Mecca. Those who sacrificed when things were tough, when it wasn't easy to be a believer, when believing was putting your life on the line, when Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and Sumayya and all of these companions and Ammar and all of the Bilal, all of these guys, when they accepted Islam, being a Muslim wasn't easy. For us, it's easy to be a Muslim, all things considered. If we're comparing our Islam to their Islam, it's peanuts. Our challenges are nothing compared to them. So when those who came after the conquest of Mecca, when the Prophet ﷺ now was in control, and he had a 10,000 strong army opening and they were victorious entering into Mecca, and now all these Bedouins and all these tribes saying, oh, now he's victorious, let's enter into Islam. It was easy. Because this was the cool thing to do. This was the cool thing to do. It was in vogue. That was the thing to do, to become a Muslim. And that's why many of them, after the Prophet ﷺ died, they made ridda. They turned their backs against Islam. They told Abu Bakr, we're not going to pay zakat. We used to pay zakat to Muhammad. We're not going to do it. Prayer is enough. But the zakat, we're not going to give it to you. So the faith had not entered their hearts. So Allah is saying, these are not equal. The ones who sacrificed, when sacrificing was a true sacrifice, they're not the same. So justice is different than equality. And Allah says, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ? Are we going to equate those who submit to Allah with those who are wicked? They can't be equal. We can't say, oh, you know what? There are multiple ways to enter Jannah. There are multiple ways. I want the youth to pay attention to what I'm saying now. There are multiple paths to Allah. There are multiple ways by which I can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's only one way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ الدِّينَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الْإِسْلَامِ. The path to Allah, the way to Allah is Islam and submission. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Whoever chooses a path other than Islam, it's not going to be accepted. So there aren't multiple ways to Allah. It's not a multiple guess question. And whatever you choose, there will be leniency. Allah made it clear. The path to me is to submit to me the way I indicated to you to submit to me. You want to choose another path? لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ. You're free. But when the time comes for the test, only those who answer correctly will enter into paradise. So, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ. And Allah says, وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا رَجُلَيْنِ أَحَدُهُمَا أَبْكَمُ لَا يَقْدِرُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ كَلٌّ عَلَى مَوْلَاهُ أَيْنَمَا يُوَجِّهُ لَا يَأْتِي بِخَيْرٍ هل يستوي هو ومن يأمر بالعدل وهو على صراط مستقيم. Allah sets forth the example of two men. One of them is dumb, not dumb as in stupid, but dumb as in, he just has, he can't make any decisions on his own. He's incapable of anything, and he's a burden on his master. He only does, whatever his master tells him to do. He says, go here, he goes there. Do this, he does that. And there's nothing good that comes out of him. Can such a person be equal to the one who commands justice and is on the straight path? The scholars had two ways of explaining this verse. One is that Allah is drawing the example, the contrast between the idols and Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That how can you compare these dumb, mute idols that are non-living, that cannot do anything for themselves? They pick them up, they put them here. They pick them up, they put them there. They drop them on the ground, they have to pick them. They're lifeless, they're useless. And yet they worship them. And He's saying, how can you compare them to Allah, the most powerful, the all-hearing, seeing, knowing of everything? He's saying there's no comparison. And the other tafsir of the Mufassirin is that no, Allah is comparing actually human beings. Someone who is actually useless in life, who has no capability of making decisions in life. He's just directed right and left. Someone brings him right, he goes right. Someone tells him left, he goes left. He has no capacity to make decisions on his own versus someone who is independent. Someone who uses his mind, someone who uses his intellect, someone who uses the thought process to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to live by the principles of justice. They can't be the same. They're not equal because equating them would be unjust on the part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do we implement justice? What are the ways by which we as believers implement justice in our lives? Number one, justice in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Again, the youth, stop talking, please. Pay attention. Worship Allah alone and associate none with Him. The ultimate way in which we are just in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we associate no one with Him. That we submit to Allah and Allah alone. The Prophet ﷺ was sitting with Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. He said, Ya Mu'adh, هل تدري ما حق الله على عباده وما حق العباد على الله? Mu'adh, do you know what is the right of Allah upon His slaves and what is the right of His slaves upon Allah? Mu'adh said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, Allah's right upon His slaves is they should worship Him alone and associate nothing with Him. And His slaves' right upon him is that he should not punish those who do not associate a thing with him. That's Allah's promise. You don't associate partners with him. You submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You follow his path. There's no punishment. So that's our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there is justice with ourselves. Yes, we have to be just with ourselves as human beings. The famous story of the two companions, Salman radiallahu anhu and Abu Darda. And in brief, Salman was staying with Abu Darda. He comes home, doesn't find Abu Darda, but Abu Darda's wife was upset. What's going on? She says, Abu Darda, he's all in his worship, praying all night, fasting every day. He's not paying attention to his family, doesn't seem to care about this life. He tells her, don't worry, I'll take care of him. So Abu Darda comes home, and Salman says, we're going to have lunch. Abu Darda says, no, I'm fasting. He says, no, you're not fasting, we're eating. Abu Darda sits down and he breaks his fast and he eats. And then after Isha, they're going to go to sleep. And Salman lays down, Abu Darda gets up. What are you doing? He says, I'm going to pray Qiyam. He says, no, you're not, you're going to go to sleep. So Abu Darda is upset that he goes to sleep. And then he thinks Salman is sleeping and he tries to sneak to pray. He says, no, you're sleeping. Now Abu Darda is really mad. And then Abu Darda falls asleep and then Salman wakes him up a little while before Fajr. He says, get up, now we're going to pray. And they pray a little bit, Tahajjud, Qiyam in the middle of the night. And then it's time for Fajr and they go to the masjid. And before they go on their way to the masjid, he tells him, إِنَّ لِبَدَنِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا وَإِنَّ لِأَهْلِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا وَإِنَّ لِرَبِّكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا فَأَعْطِي كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقًّا. Your Lord has a right upon you, your body has a right upon you, your family has a right upon you. You have to be just. Give each one their due right. Hey, Abu Darda was upset. You messed up my day, you broke my fast, you didn't let me pray all night. So he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he complains. And the Prophet ﷺ smiles and he says, Sadaqa Salman. Salman spoke the truth. There has to be balance. You have to be fair to yourself. You're not a train that's, full throttle all the way. Because then at some point, transmission goes bad, right? The same thing, the three men that came to meet the Prophet ﷺ, and they're looking and they're waiting for the Prophet ﷺ to return, and then they ask the companions, they hadn't met the Prophet ﷺ, they ask about his prayer and all of this, and it seemed that they belittled the worship of the Prophet ﷺ. One of them said, I pray every night, all night, I don't sleep at night. And the other one said, as for me, I fast every single day. There isn't a single day that I haven't fasted. And the third one said, for me, I'm not married and I'm never getting married. So the Prophet ﷺ came, he heard what they said. He said, are you the three that said this and that? They said, yes. He said, as for me, there are days I fast and days I don't fast. And I pray part of the night and I sleep part of the night. And I'm also married. This is my sunnah, this is my way. Whoever doesn't follow it is not from my ummah. So there's balance. This is the justice that we have to ourselves. It's not extreme one way or the other. I don't do anything at all, or I go to the other extreme. So this is justice with ourselves. That's why when the verse was revealed, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. The ones who believed and no shred of injustice shrouds their faith. Companions, they looked at the Prophet and said, who can do this? No injustice at all, it's impossible. The Prophet said, it's not what you think. Rather, it is as Luqman said to his son, Ya bunayya la tushrik billah. It doesn't mean that you're a perfect human being. No one is perfect. But Allah is saying that they believed and no shirk entered into their faith. So their faith is pure. But their actions, there are going to be moments where we remember Allah and moments where we forget Him. Moments where we are closer to Allah and moments where our faith kind of gets a little bit weaker. But we are striving to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Justice in inviting to Islam. We live in a society, most of it is not Muslim. How can we live in this society and not invite others to Islam? ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom, kind advice, and debate with them in the best manner. How can it be just for us to live, to all our neighbors and our friends and our co-workers and our classmates, for us to have the guidance, the best guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted to mankind, and for us not to share this guidance? This is injustice on our part. Justice in dealing with our children. Now this is directed to the adults in the audience. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I gave one of my children a certain property, and I want you to be a witness. The Prophet ﷺ said, do you have other children? He said, yes. He said, did you give each of them a similar property or a similar amount? He said, no. He said, I cannot be a witness to this injustice. And then he said, fear Allah and be just among your children. And one of the tabi'een, the generation after the companions, his name was Ibrahim al-Taymi, he said, if I were to kiss, listen to this, he said, if I were to kiss one of my children, I would consider it compulsory, required on me to kiss my other young child, lest he develop any ill feelings, get a little jealous. Why did mom or why did dad kiss him and not kiss me? Simple gestures. This is out of being just. Imagine bigger things beyond something as simple as a hug or a kiss to a child. Remember the story of the Bedouin who saw the Prophet ﷺ kissing Hassan and Hussein, his grandchildren, and he looked at him and he said, you kiss your children? I have 10 children and I haven't kissed one of them ever. 10 children whose father never showed them any kindness or mercy or compassion or love. Justice in our families. I want us to focus on this. Justice inside our families. We live in a society where we hear about divorce and high divorce rates, and sometimes we think this is something, it's outside of us. This is other communities. But this is a rampant problem inside our own homes. The Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ. The best of you are the best to their wives, and I am the best of you to their wives. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How are we dealing with our spouses? When we go home, angry face, we just had a bad day at work, don't talk to me, look at the kids, leave me alone, I don't have time for you. The baggage that we bring from outside. The Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about this, the home environment. He says, خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, as our khatib was talking today for those who were here and attended the khutbah, that, second, it should be an escape from the difficulties of this life, the hustle and bustle and all of these things that make life so challenging. When the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation the first time, where did he run? He didn't go to his friends. He didn't go to his uncle, Abu Talib. He didn't go anywhere. He ran home to his wife. He said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, Dathiruni, Dathiruni. This was the first person he ran to, because this is where he felt most comfortable. This is where he felt at home. The saying, there's no place like home. It should be true. This is how our homes should be. This is where love and mercy and compassion, second, tranquility prevails. It shouldn't be a place where, you say the tension is so thick you could cut through it with a knife. This is not how our homes should be. This is exactly what the Prophet says. The best of you are the best of their spouses. They're the ones that should come and feel that they're at ease dealing with you. That you're the most approachable person in their life. More approachable than their parents and their siblings and their friends and anyone in the world. You are the closest person to them. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, every way possible. And the Prophet says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Deal with them. Treat them بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, fairly, in the best way possible. But even if it gets to a point where you just can't, it happens. Even if it gets to a point where you just absolutely can't, you're not seeing eye to eye. What does Allah say? الطلاق مرتان. There are 2 times where there's divorce and it can be retracted. But even then, فَإِمْسَاكُمْ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. If you're going to retract after the second time, then do it with honor or separate with grace. It is not a time to settle score. It is not a time to poke out the other person's eye. It's not a time to empty the other person's bank account. This is not a time to spread rumor. This is not the character of the believer. So justice entails the highest level of character in our homes. We really have to think about these things hard. Justice with our neighbors. Prophet ﷺ says, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir, fala yu'thi jarah." Whoever believes in Allah and the hereafter, let him not harm his neighbor. So this is the bare minimum. Don't harm. Don't let your neighbor hear loud music, loud voices, yelling, screaming, arguing. You should go far and beyond. The neighbor has rights upon us. My neighbor is in need. I should be there to help them. If my neighbor is ill, I should be there to visit them. If my neighbor has financial needs, I should be assisting them. They're the closest thing. Our neighbors that are there, we should be there for them. But this extends not just to our physical neighbors in the neighborhood, but our neighbors, our co-workers, our classmates, our acquaintances that we're constantly interacting with. And it goes back to this whole idea of sharing the justice of the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many of us are sharing that with our neighbors? Justice in resolving disputes and ensuring that trusts are fulfilled. إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل. I have a debt. Someone lent me money. I don't know. What are you talking about? What loan? You never gave me any money. You never gave me. The Prophet ﷺ, the kuffar of Quraysh would entrust him with their property and their money, even though they would fight him in public because of his da'wah. But they knew he was as-sadiq al-amin. So he was the most trustworthy. They would give him property. Muhammad, keep this for us. Okay, even though we hate you, even though we don't believe your God, even though we don't believe your message, but there's no one more trustworthy than you. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah commands you to return trust to their rightful owners. And when you judge between people, judge in a fair and just way. The Prophet ﷺ says, on resolving disputes, لا يحل لمسلم أن يهجر أخاه فوق ثلاث. It's not lawful for a Muslim to desert or ignore his brother or sister beyond 3 nights. When they meet, they turn away from one another. So, you meet, I have a dispute with you, I see you in the masjid, I turn my back, no salam, nothing, no greeting, I ignore you. Prophet ﷺ says, no more than 3, okay, we had a big fight, no more than 3, that's it, that's the max. And the better of the two is the one who is the first to greet the other, to break that stalemate. How many people, not just, who are members of the community, but even blood brothers, haven't spoken to each other for months and years over some argument that is so silly. So silly. They were in a dinner and someone looked at him the wrong way, so he hasn't talked to them in 2 years. Justice, even if against ourselves and desires and families. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين. Stand firm, O believers, stand firm for justice as witnesses for Allah, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or close relatives. This is tough. This is tough. When I know that I'm wrong, when I know that the just thing is to say that I'm wrong, or my parents are wrong, or my family is wrong, it's very difficult. Because the ego doesn't want me to do that. My ego, myself, doesn't want me to acknowledge that I'm wrong. But this is the right and the just thing to do. وَإِذَا قُلْتُمْ فَعْدِلُوا وَلَوْ كَانَ ذَا قُرْبَى. Whenever you speak, maintain justice, even if it's regarding a close relative. Justice, even with enemies. Even with our enemies, we have to be just, yes. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Stand firm for Allah and bear true testimony, and don't let the hatred of the people lead you to injustice. Be just, that is closer to righteousness. Aisha radiallahu anha narrates that a group of Jews came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, Assalamu alaykum, meaning, death be upon you. They're wishing the Prophet ﷺ death. So Aisha became angry. So she said, Assalamu alaykum, death be upon you, and may Allah curse you and shower His wrath upon you. She just, she gave it all to them. The Prophet ﷺ said, be calm, Aisha, be calm. You should be kind and lenient, and beware of harshness and vulgarity. Imagine. So So she said, Ya Rasulullah, didn't you hear what they said? He said, yes. But didn't you hear what I said to them? I said, may the same be to you. Wa alaykum. They said, Assalamu alaykum. He said, Wa alaykum. And my invocation, meaning my dua on them, will be accepted by Allah, while theirs will not be accepted. No need to be vulgar. No need to stoop down to other people's level. We are above that. That doesn't do any good. It just riles things up. We are above people. We are above that kind of level of vulgarity. Prophet ﷺ in a hadith narrated by Abu Dawood says, أَلَا مَنْ ظَلَمَ مُعَاهِدًا. Anyone who wrongs an ally, someone from Ahlul Kitab who has a covenant of agreement, who is not a muharib, who's not fighting, who's not in a state of war, or diminishes his right, or forces him to work beyond his capacity, or takes from him anything without his consent, I, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, shall plead on his behalf on the Day of Judgment. Meaning he's going to be his witness. A witness for that person against the so-called Muslim who committed this injustice. Justice is even-handed. Even-handed. So rich or poor. We all know the story of Usama ibn Zayd. Usama ibn Zayd and the woman, wealthy woman who stole, and the judgment of the Prophet ﷺ was the proof and the evidence was clear, and her hand had to be chopped off. And they said, well, she's a wealthy woman. We all know the story. And maybe we can send someone the Prophet ﷺ likes and loves, to try and offer clemency. Maybe something else rather than chop her hand off. She's from a wealthy tribe. So they sent Usama ibn Zayd. Prophet ﷺ was angry. He said, أَتَشْفَعُونَ فِي حَدٍّ مِّنْ حُدُودِ اللَّهِ. Are you going to try and get me to are you interceding on behalf of a punishment prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by Allah? If Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, had stolen, I myself will cut her hand. Doesn't matter, rich or poor, doesn't matter. Justice is even-handed. Doesn't distinguish. Powerful or from the general public, doesn't matter. The story of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab when he was Khalifa. Amr ibn al-As was the governor of Egypt. And Umar ibn al-Khattab was sitting in Medina. And a Coptic man from the Christian Coptic community comes and he says, I'm coming seeking refuge in you. What happened? He said, we had some horse racing. They're having fun, horse racing in Egypt. And my horse was racing against the horse of Abdullah, the son of the governor. And my horse beat his horse. Okay, what's the big deal? Well, Abdullah wasn't too happy. So he started beating me. Instead of beating the horse, he beats me, the owner of the horse, and he says, how can your horse beat my horse? وَنَبْنُ الْأَكْرَمَيْنِ. I am the son of the honorable ones. So Umar ibn Khattab writes a letter to Abdullah, and he says to Amr, the governor in Egypt, he says, as soon as you get my letter, you and your son, you come. That's it, that's all he says. You get a letter from Umar ibn Khattab, you need a change of clothes. Umar ibn Khattab. He says, come now. So he goes to his son. And he says, what did you do? He says, I didn't do anything. He says, well, you must have done something because I didn't do anything. One of us did something. So they pack and they immediately come and they arrive. And during this time, Umar ibn Khattab told the Coptic man, you are my guest in Medina. You wait until they come. So they came. So he tells the Coptic man, tell me what you told me. So he told him the story. So he told Abdullah, did this happen? He said, yes. So he gave Umar ibn Khattab his famous staff, his famous stick. He gave it to the Coptic man and he said, beat the son of the honorable man, the one who claimed to be the son of him. So he beat him, just like he had beaten him. And then when he was done, he told him, now take the staff and beat the so-called honorable man, meaning the governor. So the Coptic man said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I have no beef with the governor. He didn't wrong me or anything. It was just his son. He told him, his son only beat you because of the position of his father. And had you beaten his father, I wouldn't have stopped you until you stopped. And then he turned to Amr ibn al-As and he told him, مَتَى اسْتَعْبَدْتُمُ النَّاسِ وَقَدْ وَلَدَتْهُمْ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ أَحْرَارًا. Since when do you enslave people? When their mothers gave birth to them and they were free. So, powerful, or you're from the general public, justice is even-handed. the famous story of Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, when he was Khalifa. And he had a shield and it was stolen. And he's walking in the market and he sees a man holding it. It was a Jewish man. He was holding it. He goes to him and says, "This is my shield." He says, "No, it's my shield." He says, "It's mine." "No." "Okay, let's go to the judge." The judge was Qadi Shuraik. So he goes before the judge and he says, "This is my shield." "No, it's my shield." So the judge says, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, do you have any witnesses?" He says, "No, I don't have any witnesses." He says, "Well, without any witnesses, you have to have a witness, and his oath, he's claiming it's his, so I have to rule that it's his." So the man is baffled. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is the Khalifa, the most powerful man at that time, governing all these wide, expansive lands, and his own judge is ruling against him for me. So the man says, "You know what? Actually, it's not mine. I found it and I stole it, and it's actually yours, and because of this justice that I just saw, I actually bear witness, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah." So, doesn't matter, Muslim or non-Muslim, justice is even-handed. Justice with the disabled. We had a whole lecture months ago about disability in Islam, when we talked about the story of Abasa wa Tawalla and the Prophet ﷺ and Abdullah ibn Maktoum. But in Islam, just because someone has a disability, just because someone has something that makes them unable to do a certain activity, that doesn't sideline that person. In Islam, we enable these people. We give them the tools that enable them to be active people in the community. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was reprimanded in that verse where he kind of frowned and turned away from Abdullah ibn Maktoum. That we as believers are not supposed to look down at people who have disabilities because it's not in their hands. Justice is blind to race, ethnicity, culture, and language. This is big. This is a big disease that we as a community have. That we look down upon people because of their ethnicity, their race, their culture, their background, the way they speak. Allah says, "Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum 'inda Allah." We made you into tribes and nations and peoples, different backgrounds, not so that you may denigrate one another, but so that you may get to know one another. The most honorable are the ones who have taqwa, which is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand. Many other ways that justice can be manifest, but we don't have the time. What are the fruits of justice? Some of the fruits that you can get from justice. Supplication is accepted. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, ثَلَاثَةٌ لَا تُرَدُّ دَعْوَتُهُمْ. 3 types of people whose dua is never ignored or rejected. And one of them is a just ruler, someone who establishes justice. Peace and security. During the hijrah, the first hijrah to Al-Habasha, present-day Ethiopia, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? There is a king there who commits no injustice against anyone. So that created an environment, a society where people can live in peace and tranquility without fear for their lives. Another fruit is success in this life and the hereafter. This is great. Prophet ﷺ was once passing out and he was distributing the bounty gathered from war. And one of the men standing there, he said, "Be just, be just in your distribution." The Prophet ﷺ said, "I would be a miserable loser if I didn't act justly," meaning loser in this life and in the hereafter. So, a corollary is being just leads to success in this life and in the hereafter. Those who are just gain the companionship, ma'iyatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ in a hadith narrated by Ibn Majah says, "Inna Allah ma'al qadi ma lam yadha, fa'idha jara wakalahu ila nafsi." Allah is with the judge so long as he is not unjust. But as soon as he is unjust, he leaves him to himself. He leaves him to himself. Enjoying the shade of Allah's throne in the hereafter. Hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. اللَّهُ فِي ظِلِّهِ. 7 categories of people who are shaded by the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. When it's really hot, the sun is so close, and there's no shade except the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first category the Prophet ﷺ mentions is a just ruler. And finally, the ultimate is paradise. The Prophet ﷺ talks about those who mediate or who judge between people, he says, Al-Qudatu thalath, wahidun fil jannah wa ithnani fil nar. There are three types of judges. One who will go to Jannah, and two who will go to hellfire. The one who will go to paradise is a man who knows what is right and gives judgment accordingly, but a man who knows what is right and acts tyrannically or unjustly in his judgment will go to hell, and a man who gives judgment for people when he is ignorant will go to hell. Narrated by Abu Dawood. So, in conclusion, we need to keep justice at the forefront of all of our interactions and relationships, measuring our thoughts, our words, and our actions by the standards of justice. Where are we in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Look and see how we can determine areas of shortcoming in our relationships with our children, with our spouses, with our neighbors, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, business partners, community members, and work on improving those relationships. And then remembering that the fruits of establishing justice far outweigh the price that's involved. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who establish justice in all facets of our lives. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He gathered us in this beautiful gathering in this life, to gather us in a similarly beautiful gathering in the hereafter. Allahumma ameen. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فستذكرون ما أقول لكم وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد وجزاكم الله خيرا.